Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 160, Meno Conclusions. If we look for a general subject of the dialogue, one underpinning the whole dialogue, we might be forgiven for thinking that it is education. We have two students, the slave of Meno and Meno himself, and rather a lot of experts who teach. These include Gorgias, Anytus, actually based on something said in Theognis, and the Thessalian horse breeders. Empedocles and Pindar are also mentioned, but they are mentioned as authority figures by Socrates, who is imitating Gorgias during one of the definitions that he gives. And then there is Socrates. I haven't mentioned Socrates yet because he doesn't appear to teach. Or to put it more accurately, he doesn't appear to the many to teach. And the many here include all of the participants in this dialogue. One reason why Socrates might appear to the many not to be a teacher is that he claims not to know various things, and he is poor. We may notice that all the others are rich, and wealth is a sign of success for the many. Could it be that Socrates represents someone who can teach but appears not to teach, while the others appear to teach but can't? I can think of a number of objections to this hypothesis, but one will do for now, and that is that Thessalians teach their sons to become horse breeders, and they are very successful at it. So it doesn't seem to be the case that the dialogue is about appearing or actually being a teacher. Even if the dialogue were to be about the appearance or reality of teachers, we would need to ask ourselves why there are three other examples of teachers besides Socrates. Why do we have Gorgias, Anytus, and the Thessalians? We could start with a rough categorization of the three. We have a sophist, Gorgias, a politician, Anytus, and craftsmen, technitai, masters of a techne, the hippike techne, horsecraft, for which the Thessalians are justly well reputed. On the subject of good reputation, or the appearance of having virtue, the Thessalians have a reputation because of the product of their techne. They actually produce good horses. When it comes to Anytus, he does have a reputation, but it's simply because he has power and wealth. We should remember that Anytus seems to be here as an Athenian example of the aristocrat in Theognis, who is described as good and worth listening to. His advice will help the person being given advice in the poem to become a better person. In other words, gain power and wealth and esteem in society. Gorgias has a great reputation because he appears to have Sophia. Socrates is the one who describes him like this, but Meno doesn't object, and it does look as though wherever Gorgias goes, crowds come out to hear him, and the aristocrats or anybody with money want to learn from him how to appear to be someone who knows. In other words, they are trying to acquire the Sophia which he appears to have. It's interesting that Anytus is shocked by Socrates' idea that one can learn from a sophist. He thinks that people are better served by listening to the good advice of any Athenian citizen, when he really means any successful Athenian citizen, someone rich and powerful, not someone like Socrates, although Socrates is an Athenian citizen. In other words, Anytus is a politikos, and Socrates is considered by the many as not being a politikos. We might consider him to be politikos because he actually does try to teach people how to cooperate and live well in a polis. It would seem that Anytus has picked on a point which we should consider carefully, and that is the sophists' claim to teach Sophia when they don't actually have any experience. What do they teach? Meno, who appears to have learnt some things from Gorgias, has a very good memory. He can quote things that he's heard, but each particular thing is said and remembered in isolation. He cannot put two and two together to come to a conclusion on his own. We've seen throughout the dialogue that Meno is confused by failing to distinguish episteme from doxa. Now, we all have opinions, so this isn't anything particular to Meno or Gorgias. So what extra thing does Gorgias give to his students? I would suggest that he teaches his students to collect opinions and categorize them so that when asked a question, they have a ready answer with many different opinions on that particular subject, as we saw with Meno's first example from Gorgias. Socrates only asked what arete, virtue, was, but Meno gave a whole list of different types of virtues, thinking that this would impress Socrates as it impresses the many. Gorgias teaches his students to be confident and generous, magnanimous with their answers, because this does impress most people who assume that it is the people who are able to answer and answer prolifically who actually know what they're talking about. In the end, we see that Gorgias trains his students to remember opinions, and that is all, while Socrates, who insists on Meno recollecting things already said in this dialogue, appears to be trying to teach Meno how to contrast and compare ideas already said in this particular dialogue in order to come to conclusions. In other words, he is not trying to make Meno remember isolated opinions, but is attempting to make Meno combine them. Gorgias then is a sophist. He teaches opinions, and he exercises memory in one particular way, which actually prevents people from achieving understanding. Anytus, therefore, is correct to look down on sophists because he has something which they don't, and that is experience. He, unlike Gorgias, knows what it's like to rule a polis, to control other people. Gorgias simply says that that is the virtue of a man, to control other people, to run a polis. But Anytus has actually done it. He knows the sort of things which one needs to do, which one needs not to do, and how to make connections, all the details that are helpful for a successful politician in a polis. Therefore, the aristocrat in Theognis and Anytus are both examples of someone who has not only memory but also experience. One cannot have experience without memory. The Thessalian horsemen are slightly above the politikos because they have not only memory and experience, but a chain of experiences which lead from the beginning to the end of their techne. And that is what a techne is, a series of steps which one must follow to achieve a particular goal, and all of this is based on experience, but is far more methodical, we might say, than the experience of Anytus, who is prepared to give pieces of good advice to people, but not a whole program from beginning to end of how to be a politikos. If he were to ask a Thessalian horseman why he has to do what he does to achieve the end, he would be unable to tell you. He would say, this is simply what we do and it works. To put it into specialist Greek terms, they know the what but not the why. And so we come to Socrates, who has obviously memory, experience, and a techne that nobody knows about. This is the techne dialektike. But in addition to this, it would seem that he does understand the why of what he's doing, the why of the need to appear to be someone who doesn't know how to teach. This is the only way to help people begin to understand for themselves. Obviously, in this dialogue, Meno fails to begin to understand because he is a model. He cannot change. Meno's slave might be one who we could consider to have changed in the dialogue, but he hasn't, and Socrates makes it clear. He says that if the slave repeats the exercise over and over again, including the mistakes, then at the end he will understand. We might conclude then that the paradigms are the sophist, and Gorgias is the deigma of the sophist. Then we have the politikos, and Anytus and the aristocrat in Theognis are the deigmata of that. The Thessalians are technitai, so they are craftsmen, and Socrates is the dialektikos. We could conclude that, but then we would be wrong, as we'll see next time.